I'm going to go over some of the examples of how to do significant figures. So what we're going to do is apply the rules that we've gone over in class. First off, let's look at three, and again, remember these are measurements. Significant figures doesn't apply to numbers that are not measurements. So we've got 903.2 grams. So rule number 1, check marks above all digits. Rule number 2, check marks above zeros in a sandwich. This zero is sandwiched in between significant figures, so it is also significant. And remember, significant means measured, not that is important, but that it is actually measured using the instrument used to collect the data. So there are 4 significant figures. And number 2, check marks above all digits. Rule number 2 is look for zeros in a sandwich. Check. I just got to the end of the measurement. So we have 3 significant figures. This example, rule number 1 is check mark above all digits. Rule number 2, check marks above zeros that come to the right of a digit and a decimal. So when we do that, a couple of things you'll notice. All right, here's our first digit. So we're going to look at everything to the right of that digit. Well, this 0 right here is the first 0 that we see that comes to the right of a digit and a decimal. These zeros are sandwiched in between those 2 significant figures. So notice how we revisited rule number 2. So you can revisit the sandwich rule at any point in time that you might need to. So if you make a sandwich, then meaning a 0 in between significant figures, you can apply that rule at any point, whether it's at the beginning or the end of the problem. So there are 4 significant figures. All right, rule number 1 in this example, check marks above all digits. Let's look for a 0 in a sandwich. I don't see any. Rule number 3, let's look for zeros that come after, meaning to the right-hand side of a digit and a decimal. I don't see any. Here's the first digit, and there's no zeros to the right of that. There are only 2 significant figures. That means this measurement was not very precise in terms of the instrument that's used to collect the data was only able to measure 2 of those digits to be known with certainty based on the precision of the instrument. So these zeros, yeah, I see these 2 zeros come after the decimal, but they do not also come after a digit, so that means they are not significant. Let's take a look at this one. Check marks above all digits. Check marks above zeros in a sandwich. I don't see any. Now we need to put a check mark above digits that come to the right of a digit and a decimal. So here's my first digit. Let's look to the right of that. Okay, so this 0, does that also come to the right of a decimal? It does. It also comes to the right of a decimal. That means it's measured or significant. So these zeros, while they are important, this 0 does not come to the right-hand side of a digit and a decimal. So it is not significant. There are only 2 significant figures. Number 6 is my favorite. Check marks above all digits. Well, I just got to the end of the measurement, so I'm done. There are 2 significant figures. All right, number 7, a little bit trickier. Check marks above all digits. Now, we're going to do check marks above zeros in a sandwich. I don't see any. Now, this one's a little bit trickier. We're going to look for zeros that come to the right of a digit and a decimal. All right, here's that last digit. This 0 does come to the right of it, but is it also after a decimal? It is not. So we have to see if it comes to the right of a digit and to the right of a decimal. So because of that, this 0 does come after a digit, but it does not come to the right-hand side of a decimal. So it is not significant, meaning it is not measured or known with certainty. There are only 2 significant figures. Number 8 is very similar. Check marks above all digits. Now, let's look for zeros in a sandwich. I don't see any. Let's take a look at zeros that come to the right of a digit and a decimal. All right, so here's that digit. We're going to look to the right of it. I do see these zeros to the right of it, but they don't also come after a decimal. So it has to be after both a digit and a decimal, and they are not. So there's only 2 significant figures. All right, rule number 9, problem number 9. I'm going to put check marks above all digits. We're going to look for zeros in a sandwich. I do have one. Now we're going to look for zeros that come to the right of a digit and a decimal. So notice this 0, it does come to the right of that digit, and it is also after the decimal. That means it is measured, meaning known with certainty. So there are 4 significant figures. Problem 10, we're going to put check marks above all digits. Look for zeros that are in a sandwich. I don't see any. Now we're going to look for zeros that come to the right of a digit and a decimal. All right, so that 0, it does come to the right of the digit, but it does not also come after a decimal. So because it doesn't meet both of these criteria, it is not considered significant or measured, known with certainty. There's only 1 significant figure, meaning that that measurement is not very precise. Number 11, put check marks above all digits. Zeros in a sandwich, I don't see any. And we're going to look for zeros now that come after a digit and a decimal. So here's that digit. let's look for zeros that come to the right of it. Those zeros do come to the right of it, but I also do not see that they come after a decimal. So they do not come after a digit and decimal. So they are not significant, meaning measured or known with certainty. All right, number 12, let's do check marks above all digits. Look for zeros in a sandwich. And let's go ahead and look for zeros that come after a digit and a decimal. So let's go to that last digit. Here it is. Let's look to the right of it. Does this zero also come after a decimal? It does. So this zero comes after a digit and a decimal, meaning it is significant. Known with certainty, it is measured. So it is, there we go, 4 significant figures. All right, one that I feel like we need more practice with is something that's like example number 3. So I'm going to add my own problem here. All right, so we're going to call this problem number 13. I want you to take a look at something for the example of 450.00 grams. Okay, when you take a look at this measurement, we're going to do check marks above all digits. All right, now we're going to look for zeros that come after a digit and a decimal. All right, so here is our last digit. We're going to look to the right of it, and we're going to look for zeros that also come after a decimal. So these zeros are coming to the right of that decimal also. Now, look how we created this sandwich. So that zero is also significant. So 1, 2, 3, 4, there are 5 significant figures in this measurement.